Okie dokie, folks, and welcome back to Monday Night Shaw on Love Wrestling. I am here with the Colton Gee, and this is our second time recording this. Unfortunately, we had there was some maintenance stuff that was going on, and the last recording accidentally got deleted. But these things happen in the world of podcasts, as Colton Gee is quite familiar with. Colton, let's start right there, bud. Familiar. You do have your own podcast gimmick. Let the fans know where it is, what it's all about.
Hey, all right. Well, yeah, I too also happen to be a podcaster. We've been doing it for about 5 years now. Actually, in like 2-3 weeks, it'll be 5 years that I've been running the Desert Tiger podcast. Sort of started it like out of just sort of like the necessity to create. I used to be a touring musician, and I ended up shattering my wrist, and out of that, sort of like I've kind of always like been sort of like driven since like the last like 8 years or so. I had an accident that kind of like made me want to chase my dreams. So after like one dream was kind of taken away from me, and like I straight up like I shattered my wrist. Like I couldn't work out, couldn't play bass, anything for 6 months.
That would ruin my love life.
Oh, it's we took a hit. Straight to the soul. But out of that, just sort of like not being able to like play shows and like tour, write music, all of that sort of stuff, I just sort of like needed an outlet to create. And through music, I sort of like found that like some interviews weren't exactly like as in depth as maybe like I would have liked or otherwise, because like, not to like say anything like against like a TV or a radio interview, they have their own structures where like maybe you get 10, maybe you get 15 minutes, and sometimes like you can't really get like full depth with a guest or otherwise, especially when you're fitting in commercials, songs, and everything else inside of like that time period, right? So I'm just like a big fan of podcasts, specifically at the time. Talk is Jericho was like my favorite podcast.
It's a good one.
It was. So another guy who like chased pretty much every dream he ever had, right? Like pro wrestler, top charting musician who was like headlined festivals like all over the world, like has his own podcast, so many creative ventures. So it was sort of just
author
like that.
Books.
Exactly. So that was sort of like my thing, whereas like if he can do all of these different things and like do them well, it's like, why can't I try and like branch out into a different area and sort of like interview my interests? Because I found sort of like in my area of Canada, I was in Saskatchewan originally, like, you know, you weren't finding a lot of like in at the time, like in-depth wrestling interviews or like in-depth like interviews with like local Canadian musicians who like at the time hadn't like really broken out big or otherwise, people I had toured with, people I was friends with. So it's sort of like just a way to like, you know, put my mind at ease and like, you know, have some sort of like a creative outlet, and then B, just sort of like give my friends like an outlet so that they could continue to share their story. And then from there, it's just sort of like grown. Our first guest was Danny Duggan of CWE. And then like the majority of my guests are musicians though. So it's sort of like we've done a mixture. We've had authors, we've had actors. But like I said, Desert Tiger's main thing is music. So we cover like pretty much all genres. It's if I like the song, I will dive into it with you. I don't care how big you are, how small you are. I've had artists who have like over 1 billion career streams and are like platinum and gold and have like sold out shows across the world. And I have covered artists who like at the time literally were getting 7 streams on their songs. But like if I mess with it, I mess with it, right? Because like that was part of my goal, was like to try and leverage like the audiences of larger musicians and then like try and introduce them to new music, because like people are finding new music through like Spotify playlists or like otherwise, but how else are people like really finding new music, right? Yeah, so kind of just evolved from there, and now it's enveloped my life, and I answer like 50 emails a day, and I love it.
So have you got full mobility and stuff back in your wrist?
It took like I don't have like full like range still, kind of. Like I work on it all the time. I've built up the strength back in it. Like I can lift just as much with both arms. Um, like so through time, like this was a few years ago, right? So like 2018 was when I finally was able to like get back into the gym. And I was told it was like I had to make decisions where it was like you can do two things, not three. You can either play bass, work out, or go to work. So of course, have to make money. So I had to go to work, and then I wanted to build strength back up in my wrist before I started playing again.
Hmm.
So gym was immediately like the next option, and like straight up starting with like 2 pound, 5 pound like dumbbells, just like straight like just working on motion and building back strength. And like it's a pain. Like sometimes like during the winter, like if it's really cold, like I will get sharp pains through my arm just because like I've got a steel plate and 7 screws and like a pin holding the thing together. But I mean, we make it work.
Yeah, I hear you. I've broken both my feet in the past,
Oh.
and then every once in a while, I just get this like gnarly pain. And they thought that maybe it was gout, but the last time I had it, I went to the doctor, and he was like, "No, this is not gout. It's like arthritis." And I was like, "Oh, that's not good." And he was like, "Yeah, there's not really anything we can do for you, so." uh, I just like I'd take like diclofenac and hope that it gets better, and usually that clears it up within a couple of days. But it's
Hmm.
really, really like sometimes I could hardly walk, and
Hmm.
it's especially like out here in Alberta when there's like it gets really cold, and like so when the winter sets in, that's when it gets the worst, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Absolutely. Yeah, I've
what was
actually
it like an auto accident that you were in?
so I was actually riding a pedal bike like literally 10 blocks. In downtown Regina. I used to live in north central Regina, so I was just riding my bike, and then I had to pass across like a busy street, and this guy happened like was speeding around, and he just pulled around me into the other lane, and he was probably going about like 60 or 70 in like a 40 zone, and light turned yellow, and then rather than going through, he just decided to hammer on his brakes like right after he cut me off. So my options were like crash into the back of the car and launch into the intersection, or hammer on my brakes, and the brakes on the bike were actually messed up. So like front brake engaged, back brake didn't. So like I still launched, but like not over the car.
Oh, yeah, that doesn't sound like it was much fun at all.
Oh no, it's I woke up and I thought like I had only dislocated it because like straight up it was like turned, and like I had popped both of these bones like out, and I thought I just dislocated it. So like the first thing I did, because like I'm in shock and like not feeling much pain, was like, can I put this back into place? I was like,
Oh, Dove.
nope, nope, I'm passing out in the middle of the hood. All right, we need to get to the hospital right now, which thankfully was like 4 blocks away.
Boy, that's rough, but I mean, at least it has resulted in like the silver lining is that you have like a fairly successful podcast and whatnot now, and you've got to talk to a lot of cool people. I mean, I've talked to Danny Duggan.
Mhm.
Definitely, I've wrestled for him a few times too. I've competed with him in the ring a bunch of times, and
Nice.
he's somebody that I really love wrestling because he's got a great mind for it and knows how to get the crowd's like reactions and
Hmm.
stuff. So he's one of my favorites. Who are some of the other wrestlers that you've had on your podcast?
So mostly like people from BC. In terms of like other wrestlers, so I've had like a buddy of mine. I'm in Kamloops, and then there's one other wrestler from Kamloops. He goes by Justin Sider. He's a little bit of like he calls himself the 40-year-old rookie. We've been sort of like training together for like the last couple of years, and sort of always travel together. So it was just like natural to have him on. I had a buddy of mine, Cope. I know he's been out in Alberta. I know he's done RCW and stuff, and like I know he did like a Canadian strong style match out in Alberta that like still like gets talked about by so many people. Dude is like fantastic human being. So I talked to him because like about like going to Japan and stuff because you got to do that at one point. Danny Deeds, the Audacity.
Oh yeah, I had
Yeah.
him on too. He's great.
Oh my goodness. I had him on last year, and it was just this deep dive into like the world of promoting, and like there were so many different aspects of the business that we dove into. I actually had to chop it into 2 episodes because it was like there's just so much valuable information coming from this man's brain that it's like I can't just like cut any of it. Like no, we just got to make it a second episode. And I recently had Jace Darcy, All Star Wrestling Heavyweight Champion. Actually, he just returned from an injury, so we kind of like set it up around that time to hype things up. He just had his first show back actually in Kamloops
Solid.
on the 17th here. And I've also had I've had like the interesting like opportunity to become friends with like Bay Aragni, who like the name probably doesn't like ring bells, but he used to be Chubby Dudley back in ECW. And
What?
he himself actually runs like a music podcast. And like I connected with him through the music world, and then when I found out he was Chubby Dudley, I was like, I need to have you on the show.
I have never even heard of Chubby Dudley. Like I've heard of the Dudley Boys,
Yeah, so
Chub, but
ECW, yeah, like way back before like the three main Dudley boys went to WWF. But before
mhm.
that, they had an entire family where like the entire gimmick was Papa Dudley went to Dudleyville and just like knocked up a whole bunch of different people and like has all these people. So they had Sign Guy Dudley, they had Chubby Dudley, like all of these different like Dudley boys. And
I
yeah, he would
remember
just
they
sit
had
there with like a
dances with Dudley.
yes, yes. And
Yeah.
like yeah, so Chubby Dudley would literally just sit there and like eat cereal and shit, and like it was fantastic. And like being able to talk to him about like his journey through the business and like how like things didn't really pan out for him, and like how like he was disappointed at first, but like once again, like you say, like I was able to leverage my like disappointments and put them into like my own show. He did the exact same thing where like, he sort of took his like own little like, hey, this isn't working out for me. What else do I love? What else can I do? And like the dude just talks rock and roll music and fast cars like all day.
Oh, like good for him, man. I mean, that's got it. That I mean, being a part of like the Dudley like dynasty is that's pretty impressive. Like even
Hey,
if you're one of the lesser known Dudleys that the Canadian Goose has never heard of.
hey man, he was a part of some part of history, even if not as many people are aware of it. It was definitely one of my more favorite interviews slash conversations I've been able to have. And like I said, he sort of became a friend after that. Was like, so that was kind of really cool.
Yeah, that's one of the interesting things about having people on your podcast is you can like use it as a networking like thing, right? Like, yeah, it's very cool to have interesting and new people on. You've also you've now become one of the premier referees out in British Columbia, and so how did you transition from being a podcaster to being a pro wrestling referee?
Actually, through attempting to get a podcast interview. So I actually came out to RCW. That's how we met.
Yes, yes,
Back
I
in
remember that.
January 2018, because RCW had brought out Al Snow, and I was just starting to like get back into wrestling. I had actually applied to like do some training for, I believe it was High Impact in Regina, like literally the week before I broke my wrist.
Oh,
So I had interest in like the industry, and it was just sort of like, how can I do this? So I actually like came down to Alberta to try and interview Al Snow and Davey Boy Smith Jr. I didn't end up getting the interviews just because like I didn't realize how busy a wrestling day actually is.
yeah,
Um,
they're pretty hectic.
so I didn't end up getting an interview with either of them. I got to have fantastic conversations with them and pick their brains a little bit, but it was just sort of like just by proxy of like I happened to know one of the wrestlers on the card through a Facebook wrestling group and
Oh,
reached
okay.
out to him. It was Scott Justice, I believe.
Oh, solid.
Yeah, so I reached out to him and just sort of like, hey man, I'm gonna be like trying to come down to Alberta, trying to like interview Al Snow. We should hang out, like. And he just sort of like reached out and was like, hey man, is there anything like you else you would love to do on the show? I know that you wanted to do this at one point. Is there like anything that like you would do? So of course, working with a microphone, naturally I was like, well, what about announcing? He's like, "Oh,
You're trying to take my
we have an
job.
announcer." And I was like, right away, he's like, "We have an announcer." And I was like, "Okay, cool, cool. What about ref?" And he's like, watch Raw tonight. Send me some notes, and then like we'll see if we can work it out." So I did that. I watched like a couple of matches, and I sent him what I already had, and he's like, "I'll talk. Like, we'll see what we can do for you." So, yeah, showed up, was given a ref shirt, got thrown in the first match on the first card I ever had to ref, and we just sort of had a blast from there. And then it took a little bit of time, like from that Alberta. I think I did 3 matches on 2 days there, and then like I didn't actually break into BC until like September 2019. So like there was a solid like year and a half break there where like some things that we don't need to dive into sort of happened that just sort of like had me on the outs with some people. So just through like hard work and like eventually like going through, I showed up for a couple seminars. I helped with setup. I helped with lights. Eventually, I got to a point where the promoter of thrash wrestling just sort of was willing to give me another opportunity, and just sort of as soon as he like I actually had a conversation with him about this weekend where I was like, dude, as soon as you gave me that ball, I ran. It's like as soon as I was allowed to put my foot back through those ropes, it was like I took every opportunity I could. It was like every learning opportunity is anytime I could ask anybody like, "Hey man, how can I improve? How can I get better?" Just to like help this team get better, this crew, like I want to be the best referee that I can be, and that's just basically it. Is like I showed up, yeah, the one day for a Kamloops show, did a seminar, helped with lights, was asked to come out like a week later to Vernon, and then as soon as I pretty much walked in, I was asked, "Do you have your gear?" Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely, I do. And
always bring your gear.
all I was just about to say, always bring your gear because you never know. And
Mhm.
I
The
have.
only time I don't take my gear is if I specifically like don't want to wrestle, which usually means I'm injured and can't wrestle.
Mhm,
Because other than that, I love wrestling and I will
mhm.
wrestle anywhere for anyone.
Hmm. And it's like that principle has basically like just being like willing to show up, put in the work, and just otherwise has like earned me opportunities because like from Thrash I was able to build up from there. I got into the other Okanagan promotion, Big West, who I know you recently came and made your debut for.
Yeah, that
So
was a lot
hype
of
hype.
fun.
Hey, glad to hear it, man. Rutland Centennial Hall is a fun building for
Yeah,
sure.
it was good, and I had a pretty fun match with KB6.
Ooh.
And yeah, it was good. I know that Marty's going to be putting out the match soon on video, so I'm looking forward to checking it out because
Heck yeah.
we worked pretty hard. Marty's ring was weird though, eh?
It's both of the Okanagan rings were like interesting.
Yeah,
Like
like
the ropes are so high.
well, the floorboards on the ring, like normally there's like steel beams that go across the ring. Well, Marty's ring has wooden, like it's just pieces of wood there. So you take a bump and there's no bounce to it. I woke up the next morning going, "Oh no, I shouldn't have taken all those bumps."
It's a living room floor. Like
Yeah,
literally, it's a deck.
yeah, but I mean, this I still like I had a tremendous time, and the day of the show I was amped to go, and I had a great time, and the
Mhm.
adrenaline carries. It wasn't till the next morning where I was like, oh, I'm glad I brought some Advil in my heating pad, you know.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
oh yeah,
Nah, I got lucky. I got lucky to be able to train inside of that ring and like Thrash's ring and sort of um just like I said, through getting matches and being able to ask like the wrestlers and otherwise, because like when I did get in, Big West had lost to the building that they were training people in. Thrash didn't have anywhere to set up their ring, so it was just sort of like before shows, I was getting in there, rolling around with the guys, and then basically just watching matches like every single day. I try and watch at least one match a day, usually when I'm eating supper, and try to like watch all of these different things and just sort of break down what does the ref do, how does he interact with people, and just sort of taking that and then once again just taking my matches and then like going from one match a card and just sort of eventually building the trust and learning and growing as a talent. And I mean, like, I'm very thankful to like every wrestler that was a part of that journey because in a lot of other places, referees can get like a little bit more of training. I know Lance had offered it at one point, but had stopped doing it because like there wasn't enough interest. And but like I know in Seattle, like refs get practice matches sometimes, and otherwise, like I didn't have that.
Yeah.
I was basically like I said, first card, first match, like thrown into the fire. And if it wasn't for like the wrestlers, like just wanting me to be a better talent so that like the matches can be better all around and like them being willing to share knowledge and everything else because like right from the get-go like even that first match like Big Jess Barricade like Big Jess and like heavy well Harlan Abbott heavy metal at the time both like pulled me aside because they were a tag team and like Metal, who like had a car like his match later on in the card, like watched his tag team partner's match, obviously, but like he didn't have to like watch me and like take the time to like tell me these things, right? It was my first
Mhm.
match ever. He never knew if I was ever going to do this again, right? Like, how did he know that like this knowledge would actually get used to like to take the time and to want to take the time to make the people around him better. Like it's stuff like that that just really, really like helped me to get this far. And then just also like a few other referees, like Charlie Joseph. He's a wrestler now. He's been RCW and like Monster Pro in Alberta a couple times, but usually he wrestles out here. And like he used to be a referee too, and he was like the main referee out here. So like even though he's like 10 years younger than I am, like I was his understudy, and I was like he was watching my matches and giving me advice. And I was lucky enough to have Kevin Jeffries out here as well, who I always joke Kevin Jeffries watches more of my matches than I do. And it's honestly probably true because, like, Kevin Jeffries used to be like a Stampede Wrestling, WWF. Like, he was like the late 80s, like, I want to say like 86, 87 sort of like area when Stampede was originally sold off to the WWF. He sort of like went with that and became a referee. He spent a couple of years there. So, like, having somebody like that with like 40 years of experience who's been able to see like the evolution of wrestling and he can sort of tell you like hey this is how I would have done it that like back then like I understand maybe you guys are doing it a little bit different now and like he's like very open to these things rather than being like hey man you should be doing it this way. It's always just like hey what was like your thought process here, did you consider doing it this way, like having just like it's basically like if it wasn't for the wrestlers and if it wasn't for just like the opportunities to get in there and ply my craft and like every match I try and like take one thing that I think that I didn't do like that greatly and then the next show I will try and focus on like that one thing. I don't try to pick out too many things because if I'm trying to like focus on improving too many areas, I'm going to like be overthinking. I'm going to
Yeah.
forget something, right? Like whatever it is, it's just a matter of like taking that one thing, focusing on it and just trying to give the best absolute matches that I possibly can because I love this industry and it just brings me so much joy to see like people in the crowd enjoying it, to know that like if the wrestlers enjoyed the match and like if they're happy with me and just like all the way from the top down. It's just it's an incredible feeling and like it's even coming from the music industry. It's like they're similar, but both of them are just so different and there's nothing like them, you know? It's
Mhm.
wrestling is its own different beast and even like as the referee, like I take my matches very seriously. Like if anybody has ever seen me backstage, like before every single match, like I'm getting hype. Like I'm out there, like I'm going through like what I need to. Like I am like going through breathing techniques, trying to get my heart rate up so that like once I get out there and I'm in with the fans, I'm already there. I'm already ready to go and like just bring the best absolute matches I possibly can.
100%. You did mention that you did do some referee like training eventually. What what can like I this is a question I just asked Joe King because I recorded with him like
Mhm.
right before I got on with you.
Joe.
Yeah, he was a good dude. I
Yes.
really enjoyed our interview. But what are the differences between training to be a referee and training to be a wrestler?
So there's like different fine points. So like as a referee, like obviously like I've done a lot more wrestler training than I've done referee training because like once again, like there wasn't really much for ref training. Like even when I went down to the dojo, like they are giving a little bit more ref training there now. But like when I was going down there, I was just straight up doing the wrestler training. And I
Yeah.
was doing the rolls with them. I was doing like all the rope work, beginner, advanced class, like trying to just once again prove that like hey man, I'm willing to work hard, like even if this isn't what I'm supposed to be learning, like as a referee, like I want to be the best talent I possibly can be all around. So it's like as a referee there's different things that you need to watch for, and there's so many things that you don't think about like when you first start, like making sure people are healthy, right? Like you don't really like think about like that's your job until like you actually get in there and somebody gets hurt and it's like, "Oh, this is my call." Like
Mhm. Have you ever had
cuz
to stop a match?
thankfully no. I've had matches that have gotten close. Ref a lot of hardcore. Oh tier. So like one of my first matches, I actually mentioned Cope earlier. My first match refing Cope. I think it was the second card I was refing in BC. First match of the night. He like simple spot where you get thrown into the corner from the outside floor, right?
Mhm.
Frickin' he came in on the inside, caught his head on the turnbuckle.
Oh,
Immediately gashed, bleeding everywhere. And I got out to like go check on him, and I'm like, "Hey, man!" And like he just looks me straight in the eyes. Don't stop the match. I was like, "Okay,
jeez.
okay." I was like, "I'll let you go for a little bit, but if I like notice that you're out of it, dude, or I think you have a concussion, we're going home."
I mean, I think that's totally fair, and it is like it's an underrated responsibility of the ref. But like you'll even see it on WWE and like especially in like TLC matches, like a guy will take a big bump and the ref will come over and they'll like touch their
Mm-hmm.
hand and stuff, and then they're
Mm-hmm.
just waiting for the squeeze, right? Like the hey, I'm all right,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
You have control of your body. You can feel my hand and you can control your own hand. Thank goodness. All right. And that's
And I
just it, is
mean,
like making sure that people aren't paralyzed, right?
yeah, yeah, and it's also like I remember when I I had a match and I got smacked in the back of the head with a chair and it was bleeding all over the place and the ref came over and was like, "Hey, are you okay?" And I was like, "No, he hit me right in the back of the head with a chair." And the ref like felt back there and there was blood all over his hand. He's like, "Yeah, you're fucked up. We got to get you in the back." And I was like, "Okay," because like it was at the end of the match, but
Hmm.
I like it was Charles who was the ref that night, and
Okay.
so yeah, we he took good care of me, and
Hmm.
I think that's important. Another thing I talked about with Joe was that people don't realize that there is a lot of communication that happens between the wrestlers through the referees.
Depends on who you're working with too, right? Because like some newer wrestlers don't communicate very much. I remember the first time like one of I had to do like a really old school style match. Whereas like we're gonna call it in
Okay.
ring kid, like straight up, like,
Yep.
hey man, what's the plan? When I don't kick out. Okay, no, like straight up, dude. Like, no, you're gonna send me into a panic attack because like I'm afraid to mess up. Like, what is the plan when I don't kick out? Okay, sure. And I've gotten a
Yeah.
lot more
No.
used to that, but it's still
I've
like,
that's another thing I talked to Joe about, and I was like, yeah, there's, some guys that will put the whole thing together in the back, and they'll give the ref the iggy on the finish, and
mhm,
of course, like if you're gonna bump the ref or whatever, as common courtesy to let the person know, you don't want to
just let
go
them know.
shoot moves on referees and stuff. That's not cool in my
It's happened.
my it's I think it's only polite to let them know that something's coming, but um like yeah, I definitely know that there is guys that are the ref will walk up and be like, so what's the finish, and they're just like, well, when I don't kick out, that's the finish, um and like I say, like there's other situations where maybe something goes awry and they need to create some space, and then you'll say, okay, well, hey, that didn't work out, I'll tell them I'm going to do this to them, and
Hmm.
like, and then there's a lot of instances, like, I'm not trying to kill the magic, but like if their double down is happening, as the ref will come over and you'll be like, hey, tell them that it's two clotheslines and a back elbow next, like
Hmm.
that kind of thing, right?
Hmm.
um and
Even
it
just
just
telling time, right? Where it's like come over
that's
and like
yeah, a
four
very
minutes.
important thing, for sure. I My match on Saturday, we went out and wrestled, and it was like 20 minutes. And then when it came back through the curtain, Ref Smalls was there, and he was like, what the hell? You guys went way over time. And first things first, I was like, bro, I wasn't given a time. So, this is not on me. And like, yeah, but it was one of those things. And like the referee we had for that particular match is one of the newer referees,
Hmm.
Rosa. So
Okay.
she like, we didn't, like, nobody was giving us times, and I'm still fairly new, so I'm not great at, you know like, I if they had told me, oh, we need such and such amount of time, then I was just like, well, let's go out
Yeah.
there and wrestle, and then when we get tired, we'll stop wrestling.
Go
Like,
home, kid.
yeah. But yeah, no, time is an important thing, especially if it is given to you. You need to stick to it, and it's so much
Mhm.
easier when the referee is helping you out. Like, I know
Mhm.
Ben Uman is really good for that.
Yes.
Whenever I'm wrestling and Ben is one of the refs, he'll be like, okay, you guys have gone 5 minutes. Yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah.
I honestly like I didn't start keeping time until probably Nation Extreme because that was the first time where it was like we need a hard like 8 minutes, and it was like because before it'd be like 10 to 15 for like a lot of the other promotions I worked for because like it was a little bit looser, like filming
Mhm.
and like trying to get things exactly on time wasn't like as much of a concern. So for me to like show up and it was like, okay, so do you have a watch? Never owned one in my entire life. And I was like, okay, cool. So we'll give you signals from the side and you just have to pay attention and not make it obvious. Okay, sure, I'll try.
In RCW, sometimes you will hear
Yeah.
over the loudspeaker, 5 minutes has elapsed. 5 minutes has elapsed during this match. And, that's specifically so the wrestlers know, hey, you've gone 5 minutes. And,
Mm.
if you're supposed to go 10 and you hear 15 minutes has elapsed, it means time to take it home, boys. Like, you're,
Somebody's
yeah.
about to yell at you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like I say, I got a little bit of the third degree on Saturday from Ref Smalls, but nobody else really seemed to be upset about it. The promoter didn't give me any grief or anything, so
Right.
uh, I think it was fine. But yeah, it's just that's one of those things, because like, especially like a high production value show like an NEW,
Mhm.
where I mean, I don't know if NEW has like TV or whatnot, but they definitely are releasing stuff on YouTube. And
Mhm.
I think that, like, especially for one of those shows where that sort of thing is important, the ref keeping time for you can be absolutely invaluable.
Well, and it's just it is sometimes as a wrestler, like you don't realize because, as you mentioned, sometimes you build your match in the back and like you think, okay, this will only take up this much time. But once you get out there, you start working, you start interacting with the crowd, you start selling, right? Like you
Mhm.
start feeling the pain, like you start adding like little bits of time, like everywhere throughout here. And like some people are really good at keeping everything tight and they know exactly like how long like something should take, but some people like will build it and then like not realize like, hey, I want to try out this new thing. Oh, that took longer than I thought it was going to, right? So
Mhm.
it's you sort of have to be there. You have to like be on it and just sort of like let, like you said, communicate all of these different things, whether it's injuries, whether it's time, whether it's like what somebody wants, whether it's, hey man, watch that fan in the front row. It looks like they're about to jump into the ring, which has happened numerous times.
Oh, really? So we were just talking, and you were mentioning that it looked like you were told to keep an eye on the fans that might jump in the ring, and then you mentioned that people actually have. Uh, what happened, and like describe the situation to me? How did you handle that?
So thankfully, I've been able to cut most people off before they get in the ring. Recently at a thrash show in Penticton, I was actually at Love Wrestling, hanging out with you that
Solid.
evening. Yeah, so while I was at Love in Edmonton, we actually, after the main event, there was a fan who like was wearing a luchador mask apparently, and like apparently you could tell that he was like getting revved up and ready, and like for what, who knows. And yeah, no, after a schmoz finish, apparently he was not happy, and he decided he wanted himself a piece of Jace Darcy and Jordy Taylor. And
Those are not the guys I want to jump.
no, no, and thankfully, like they didn't get to him because like other wrestlers cut the dude off and like jumped him in the ring immediately and like pulled him out. But like there's been times where I had like, I want to say like a 60-year-old lady tried to jump in on Michael Moore once because he was working her during like halftime and before the show. And yeah, like partway through the show, he straight up came up to me and he's like, "Hey man, I want you to watch that lady in the back row over there because I don't trust her." And sure enough, partway through the match, lady starts coming up and like grabs onto the rope, and I immediately just turn to her and don't do it. Don't do it. Like she just like looks at me and like takes her hand off the rope. Like, yeah, like just back away, please. And then like there was
That's
another time
insane.
in Vernon where there was a teenage kid who like tried to get in on the ring like in the middle of an event, and like once again straight grabbed onto the rope and was pulling himself in, and like I just happened to be right there at the spot and turned to him and was like, "This is a bad choice and you are going to get hurt." And I turned to his parents and I was like, "Come get your kid right now because like it's not gonna go well."
Yeah, no, that's like now you're stressing me out because I have a couple more matches coming up in the Okanagan, and I don't want that to happen while I'm wrestling. Like,
I think you have Julie refing, do you not? So usually she's pretty good for everything.
yeah, I got to meet her at the first show, and she did a heck of a good job for somebody having to ref the entire show.
Hmm.
That's got to be like that's not a thing that happens to the wrestlers typically. Is that
Hmm.
you don't usually have to work multiple matches on a show. Sometimes you'll do two
Maybe
because
like
like
one match in a battle royal, right?
yeah, you get on those shows where it's like, okay, we got eight wrestlers. We'll have four singles matches in a Survivor Series, or four
Hmm.
singles matches in a Battle Royal, and so you get like two, but rarely ever. I've never heard of a wrestler having to be in the ring the entire night.
Hmm.
But I have heard of referees that have done that, and I imagine that that's got to be pretty like it's got to take a toll on your body and whatnot. You
Oh,
probably have to be
yeah.
quite ready for it, eh?
It's like I don't know what other people do. I know like you mentioned Joe earlier. Like Joe hits the gym every single morning
Yeah, no, we
almost.
definitely
Um
talked about how jacked he is.
It's hilarious because we've actually had somebody walk up to us once and was like, "You guys got to stop working out. You're putting the wrestlers to shame."
Well, I even asked him about that. I says, "Hey, does it when you're out there, like, is there any guys that are like, hey, can we have the scrawnier guy? Because like this guy's gonna make us look bad."
I'm not that much scrawnier, unfortunately.
I mean, yeah, no, and I'm not trying to cast shade on you, nor was
Oh,
I
I know.
even like mentioning you. But generally, the referees are slighter than the wrestlers. You know what I mean?
I wear a very baggy ref shirt just to like it just droops off of my shoulders. You can't really tell how big like my chest is or anything, and that's sort of like just why I sort of like oversize my ref shirt just to sort of help out in that area because it's I don't want to be like it's like you have some refs in like the WWE who are like I know there's like one guy on NXT who's like mega jacked and like he's muscle referee as far as I'm concerned. And he's I can't remember like what his name is, but like he's also working with a lot bigger dudes and like yeah, for us it's I know like 3 days usually. I try to do like a couple days before the show just so that I can like recharge, refuel and like know that I'm taking care of my body. But I'll try and run like an hour, hour and a half on the treadmill, try to do like 4 to 6 miles just a few days beforehand, just to make sure that like my body is capable of going different paces and like continuing to go straight just in case I ever have to do this. Like there has been days where I've done 8 matches in a day. Like I know that I think I've done like 11 matches in a period of 30 hours is like the most I've done in like a short period of time, but it's like like I mentioned before, I was getting like 1 match a show. Like now I average 3 or 4. And even then, it's if you're doing multiple shows a weekend, like you could be swinging your shoulder like over 100 times.
Yeah.
So like it's not just making sure that your cardio's there. Like you have to take care of your shoulder. Like a lot of like people don't like think about this, but like when you count with your forearm and your hand because if you count with just your hand, you might jam your wrist. And as like somebody who has had wrist injuries in the past,
Yeah.
like definitely not something I want to do. But like people from the top to the bottom will tell you like with all of it because it makes better sound and it protects your wrist. And like some people don't swing as much as I do just because like protecting your shoulder. I know like quite a bit of like old school refs from the WWE have had to have like knee surgery, hip surgery, just because like when you're doing slides and stuff, like it's not easy on those parts of your body. And like even myself, like I will walk away from a show like with my hip kind of being like out after, and it's like, yeah, it's like I can't wait till I'm 60,
I,
but I
uh,
love it.
I, yeah, no, I do too. Definitely. I do, I kind of, I've gotten to the point now where like things will happen to me in matches and, hopefully I'm not getting seriously injured, but
Yeah.
like I've been kicked in the face before and stuff. And like last time I was wrestling with Colton Kelly in Calgary,
Okay.
and it was a tag team match, and he did a spin kick on me, and it was our
Mhm.
second match together. The first time he got me in the chest in
Yeah.
the first match, so naturally when he came at me with this kick, I was like, and then he got me right here, which I learned, oh, just
Mhm.
protect your face. If you get kicked in the chest, big deal.
Yeah.
But uh, um, like I started bleeding out my nose, right? Because
Mhm.
I got kicked fairly hard, and so blood started coming out my nose. And the referee, who was looking out for my safety, came over and he's like, "Hey, Goose, your nose is bleeding. Pinch your nose and lean your head back or whatnot." And I was like, no, motherfucker, I'm going to wipe all this blood all over my face so I look like a psycho, like
Well, also, like,
I'll
it's gonna take
live.
minutes to
Yeah,
clot, right? Like,
yeah,
just
yeah.
sit here while your opponent is just like taunting the crowd and it's like, yeah,
Well,
give me another minute, give me
this
another
was
minute.
like right as the bell had like rang after the match, right? So, but I was like, whatever, it's not a big deal. So
Hmm.
what? I'm bleeding, I'll live.
If it's a
Yeah,
profuse amount, like, yeah, absolutely, do something about it. But like,
yeah,
it's there's amount that like, a person can bleed where like you've got 6 pints,
yeah.
like if you're only out there for 8 minutes, like as long as you're not gushing, like you should be okay. One would think, right?
Yeah, we had one of the other wrestlers on the show on Friday night in Calgary, Colton Noss, and
Mhm.
he busted his lip open
Mhm.
and came backstage, and he's like, and he was like totally like amped up because he had just had a match and he had a really
Mhm.
fun time and whatnot, and it was like, oh, your mouth is bleeding there, man, and my thing was, hey, make sure you go get a picture of that so you can post it. You didn't look like a badass, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So like I don't know. It's just one of those little things. I wanted to tell you too a little story about people running in the ring and whatnot because I was at a house show in Victoria,
Oh wow.
WWE house show,
Mm-hmm.
and I believe it was like Triple H and Flair versus Batista in the main
Mm-hmm.
event. And at one point, like near the end of the match, a fan ran in the ring to get involved or whatever, and
Mm-hmm.
it was the referee that gave this guy like the most hellacious, like, not even Goldberg does a spear this hard, and it was crazy. Like, yeah, the referee speared this guy, and then Triple H got on him, and they got that guy out of there, but
Mm-hmm.
he didn't get out of there unscathed. So
Well,
yeah, if
you
you're
never
ever at
know.
a show, like, don't jump in the ring. It's a bad idea because
Don't
best case
please.
scenario, the referee will get to you before the wrestlers do.
And that's part of why like I get warned to watch people and why like I would tell people before they get in the ring is like I like you're gonna trip on the ropes getting into the ring because you don't know how to do this properly.
Mhm.
And by the time you figure that out, I'm gonna have you locked up in a submission. Like I'm gonna be behind you, I'm gonna have you in a headlock and we're gonna be on the ground.
Yeah,
Like
I mean,
unless you know how to get out of it, like
there's so much that goes into it. Like you say, even there's even strategies for getting in and out of the ring. Like I had to be taught how to get in and out of the ring, right? So
how to walk in the ring, right? Because like when you first step inside of it, like it's different than what you expect it's going to be. And just
yeah,
like the
and
way
like
that
I
it
say, they're all
moves.
different too. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the RCW ring feels significantly different than the Big West ring.
Mm-hmm.
And then like there's other rings I've seen that have, like, instead of having steel boards, like steel underframe, they just have two giant like steel log frames or whatever. And like they all like they all bump differently and all feel
Mm-hmm.
differently. And sometimes you get something that's really bouncy, and sometimes you get something that's not so bouncy. And the not so
Mm-hmm.
bouncy ones are a little rougher to bump in, but they're easier to walk in.
Yeah.
And then like it depends on the padding too. I know that recently Squig bought some new pads for the RCW ring, and we
Mm-hmm.
used them twice, and then we didn't use them again because nobody liked them.
Hmm.
It was like styrofoam, and you would literally, it was like walking in quicksand or
Oh.
trying to run in quicksand because they were just like, they were not the proper kind
Mm-hmm.
of padding or whatever. So
Mm-hmm.
they got used on like two shows, and then it was like, oh, we're gonna have to get something else because like you can't run spots properly and stuff when you're like, oh my god, I
Mm-hmm.
can't. Like it's running in quicksand, and it was really really cumbersome and difficult.
Well, even just lifting another human being safely and like in that environment too, right? Because like if your footing isn't properly, like who's to say that you hoist up a 250-pound dude and suddenly you lose your footing, right? Like,
Yeah, 100%.
not cool.
It's like even at training and stuff, we'll be training and we bring in like a mat or whatever. Sometimes like I'll if I'm gonna do something, yeah, I'll bump the person on the mat, but I don't want to stand on the mat because like it just feels like you don't have the
Hmm.
steadiness under your feet there if you've got a big mat there. So like yeah, a lot of times it's just one of those weird little things that people don't think about.
Hmm. Oh, absolutely. And it's even just like running the ropes too, where it's like there's so much that goes into the footwork of
Yeah,
doing that and otherwise. And it's like even as a ref, like trying to make sure that like I'm staying out of people's way and like having to like do footwork like that. Because like another one of the things that I do before shows is work on my footwork. And like I actually take like a few like football slash boxing like footwork exercises, and you'll see me like bouncing up and down and like turning my hips and like just running and just moving my feet in different directions because it's like I don't know exactly how things are going to go down, so I'd rather just be prepared to
yeah.
like know that like okay, I can move this way if I need to and like my body's ready for it, it's stretched for it, I'm not going to strain myself because things happen very, very quickly inside of the wrestling ring, and like refs can get caught out of position, and like it sucks, but like it's And then suddenly, like, if that happens, suddenly your match changes, right? Because, like, oh, I wasn't supposed to be laying on the ground right now, but here we are. And it's like, okay, so now we have to, like, coordinate, like, and then the wrestlers have to, like, work around, like, okay, so the ref's down, the bad guy should probably be cheating right now. And, like, they have to change, like, what they're doing just because, like, somebody wasn't able to get out of the way in time, right?
Hmm. Yeah. No, for sure. There's all kinds of like little things like that for sure. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I have to make sure that I stretch out my legs real good before I go out there now, and I do that every show because my ACL's torn. So
Mm-hmm.
if I don't and I hurt that even worse, then it's a bad situation for me.
Yeah,
But
ACL is important.
yeah, yeah. Moving on from that,
Yeah.
I wanted to get back to your podcast, the Desert Tiger podcast. That's an interesting like name for a podcast. Where did you come up with the name for your podcast?
Well, I guess you could call me a weeb or an otaku or whatever you want to call it, because I'm a little bit of a nerd, or at least was maybe a little bit more of a nerd
Okay, I
back in
don't
the
know what a
day.
weeb or an otaku even is. I've never even
Okay,
heard those
so like
expressions before.
otaku used to be like a derogatory term in Japan for like somebody who's like so focused on like some aspect of popular culture that like it's a detriment to the rest of their social skills.
Oh, okay.
Weeb is kind of like the same thing. Basically, it just means that like you're an anime nerd. So like back in the day, I was like also just like a very big anime nerd and happened to watch like my favorite series of all time is called Gundam. And in Gundam Seed, there happens to be a character whose nickname is the Desert Tiger. And like at the time, I thought it was like the coolest thing ever. Like not thinking about like the military, like um, resemblance of the name and like that's probably where they took it from because like it's a style of camo, right? But like for me I was
Okay.
just like this is a cool name and I wanted to start a record label like I want to say 2009 like after I had just graduated from high school, but at the time like I wasn't organized enough, I wasn't driven enough, like I just didn't have like the proper mindset maybe like you know there's a lot of things that go into
Yeah, that
um,
sounds like it
these
would
things.
be quite the undertaking to start a record label.
Well,
Did
and
you eventually get around to that? Like,
not yet.
no?
Yet.
Oh, that's fair. Have you ever had anyone like debut their next song on your podcast or
Oh
anything like
yeah,
that?
absolutely.
That's cool.
Absolutely. We've done that a few times too. I play less music than I used to just because now I'm sort of dealing with like larger entities like before when it like I wasn't dealing with like major record labels or like management companies or otherwise like it was a lot easier for like when the artist had 100% control of their rights to just be like yeah go ahead and use my music because then like once you get to the higher level it's just okay so we're gonna send our lawyers over to talk to you and you're gonna have a nice little discussion about how much money we would like you to pay for to play these music on the podcast and it's like well I don't make enough revenue to pay for that so got the music but sometimes I still will like if a friend wants me to I do have a friend who like runs like an EDM label she's been on the show a few times, Mellafresh. Like she insists that I play music on the show and like will give me full rights and everything. So like it really depends on the person if they really want their stuff played on the show, but usually I'll just like throw links in it or otherwise. But yeah, so getting back to it is like back then I was an alcoholic. I was not in the proper mindset like I said to do like any of these things. Like I wasn't good with like financial like, you know, balancing and everything because once again I was an alcoholic and spending pretty much all my money on booze and drugs and like wasn't in the proper space and like I'm happy to say that like I actually just passed like 10 years alcohol free.
Oh,
So
good for you, brother.
since my last relapse. So, pretty like just saying that still gives me shivers because like it's pretty awesome to do that. And I don't know, it's like I mentioned earlier, I had an accident probably about 8 years ago, where just everything wasn't going right. And I kind of just decided that it was like I wasn't living life for me. I was chasing other people's dreams, what other people told me that I should be doing my entire life. Like, I enjoyed being a carpenter, but it wasn't my passion. And after the accident, like I said, we just sort of like ended up pursuing music first. And that was one of the goals I had. Wrestling was one of my other childhood goals, and the other one was to be a Much Music VJ. And so, like, years later, like, all I did in 2019 is I started the Facebook page and I never published it. And it was just sitting there. It was
Hmm.
Desert Tiger Records, was just sitting there since 2009. And I eventually forgot about it. I moved on. And then one day, I just like, when I was trying to think of a podcast name, I went into Facebook and I was like, hey, well, let's try and create a page here. Like, how difficult is it to do it? And then I happened to notice, hey, I've got this page that's been sitting here for like almost a decade. And it just sort of became this thing where it's, I don't know, it all just came together where the name suddenly had just so much more meaning to me because I like sort of sat down and I thought about it. And like the character inside the show is somebody who had to go through like a dramatic change after being defeated. And he ends up going from like a villain to a good guy. And it's just like the story of being able to like change in the face of adversity, in the face of defeat, to be able to like adapt and realize that, like, you know what, maybe the thing that I've been believing in this entire time is wrong or whatever it is. And it just sort of like seemed to fit the goal of like, go ahead and chase your dreams. And like, jungle cats are like some of my favorite animals. Like, it is my favorite type of animal of all time. So like that fit too. And
Did you
then
watch Tiger King?
I did not
Oh,
actually.
really? You
Everybody else did,
absolutely
and I
should.
didn't.
I love it. I actually have a picture of Joe Exotic from Tiger King,
Huh.
and it's right next to a picture of Squake's dad, and
Huh.
they look remarkably similar.
Yeah. It's
Anyway, that's completely off the
no
rails.
worries.
Anyway,
Yeah.
we are approaching the hour here, so why don't you let everybody know where they can follow you, where they can get a hold of you if they'd like to book you to referee a match or whatnot. And maybe why don't you let us know, like, do you have a Spotify for your music if anyone would like to give that a listen?
So yeah, we'll go into that quickly here. I realized that I went in a little bit of a tangent there with the name of Desert Tiger. So to tie it off very quickly, when I moved to Kamloops, Kamloops is a desert, and they used to have a zoo here. And the main draw at the zoo used to be Zeph the tiger. So it just sort of connected, whereas like, you know what? I was rebuilding myself. I was taking on my dreams. I was adapting. I was moving on. And then it just sort of became like, hey, this sort of also fits your new home. So it was the silliest name to take on. It's been one of the most difficult things about running the show is trying to tell people like what it means, and it's
Yeah.
always a question. But you can find the Desert Tiger podcast literally like anywhere a podcast is found. It's on like so many different aggregators, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. I have a YouTube channel where we do video content. We've been releasing our interviews and video since the start of 2021. And that's just been growing into its own little, like, it's literally me and one audio editor. And what we've been able to turn it into is absolutely incredible. And that is available, like I said, on YouTube, on anywhere you can find a podcast. I myself, the Colton Gee, available on pretty much all social media. Same tag for pretty much the Colton Gee for TikTok, Twitter, Instagram. The Desert Tiger podcast can be found at Desert Tiger Pod on Instagram and Twitter. You can also find it on Facebook. If you want to book me to referee your shows, I have one heck of a resume. It's gotten me booked all over the place, like WrestleCore and Nation Extreme Wrestling. And like I said earlier, always bring your gear and always work as hard as you can. because that's what has earned me every single one of these opportunities. Is like one of the trainers at the Lionsgate dojo is basically because like he was impressed with my work ethic. Like he told me to email both of those companies, and it opened up massive doors, and it's got me like incredible matches that like I am willing to send to anybody, because like I have refed Impact World Championship matches, and like, some of like the top indie talent that there are out there, like Kid Bandit and Giselle Shaw and like Chelsea Green, and like this past year has been incredible, and I want to go even further. I recently got back to Edmonton for Love Pro Wrestling, all these different places. If you want me to send you my resume, colton.gesch@gmail.com. Or find
Solid,
me on
buddy.
social media.
And is any of your music available?
So the music I created with the band I used to tour with, they're called Almost Alien. You can find their EP called Crash Landing, which was released in 2016, I believe. That is available on all platforms. As for like my own personal music, we haven't released anything yet. We're sort of in the process of like defining exactly what sound I want to go forward with. Because like as when I play in a band, I'm a bassist. I've always just sort of been like a session dude, sort of like playing in the background and otherwise. And like this time around, like I want to be the vocals,
Yeah.
and I want it to actually be my words, my experiences, the things that I've lived through,
Have,
whether that be my like accidents, the addictions, like all of that other stuff, or whether it's like, just my love of various different things. I want to create, I want to express, and I think that it's gonna probably like it's been a long time that I've been talking about it, but I think that probably the start of 2023 is when we're actually going to get there.
Solid,
Yeah.
solid. Alrighty. Well, I want to thank you again for re-recording with me here on Monday Night Shaw,
No
and
worries.
hopefully I'll get to see you soon, and maybe even have you referee one of my matches. I think that'd be awesome.
I will say that my messages have been popping off while we've been doing this interview, and that opportunity might be coming a lot sooner than we think it will.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes me real happy.
Yeah, me too. Me too, my friend. I'm sorry if I rambled on you. I love to do it, but it's always fun to talk about something that I love, and especially multiple things that I love: music, wrestling, and all of these things, especially with a friend. So I appreciate you taking the time to sit down and chat with me, Kyle.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you taking the extra time having to re-record, but I feel like this interview went just as good as the first one, if not better. So
I hope so.
uh, I'm gonna cut it there and just say thank you one more time.
Thank you.